G'day guys, welcome to Dingle DIY. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can make your very own Pikler triangle for free. Now there are four main components to these. There's the short ladder, the long ladder, the two triangles on either side that hold them together to make an A-frame, and then the climbing ramp. I will give you guys a cutting list so you can copy my measurements exactly, but I'll also show you the methods that I use, so depending on what material you have available, you can still get the same result. Now the materials are going to cost you about $75. If you want to save a bit of money, you can salvage a pallet and cut it up to make the sides of your ladder and maybe some of the holds on the ramp. Now some of you might be wondering how we're going to make one of these for free. Now basically what you want to do is make two of them, sell one, and recoup your money that you spent on materials. Now if you stick around to the end, I'll show you how I made these handy little magnetic knobs. These are what screw into the sides here, and that's how we can hinge these two ladders for easy storage. Now if you don't want to buy this material, you can salvage timber from a pallet. It's a bit more laboursome because you have to sand all the timber, pull out the nails, all the things like that, but you will save yourself about 30 bucks if you're trying to do it on a budget. If you want to use the pallet approach, you're going to need a few more tools just to get the timber nice and smooth and cut to size. Basically, once you've pulled the pallet apart, pull the nails out, and then we'll cut the boards to width, and then we'll cut them to length. I'll cut 4 of these to 900mm, and then 2 of those will get cut down further, but I'll show you how to get to that measurement soon. First thing we want to do is mark out a center line. And then we want to figure out what radius to cut on the ends. And these two holes are 45mm apart. If your timber was a different width, say if it was 100mm, in your case you would make these two holes 50mm apart, basically half the width of this. Okay, 2 of these are going to stay the length that they are, so then we can turn them around, cut the same radius, but before you do it, I've got a bit of a knot here, and the other 2 are going to get shorter by about 100mm, so maybe I'll save that and try cut that out. This one's pretty good, that one's pretty good. And this one's got some damage here, so I'll try to cut as much out of that as I can. So we'll get to those in a sec. Now this next part might seem confusing as to why we're doing it in this order, but basically we want to mark out the rungs on the longer ladder, and then we'll mark out the rungs on the shorter ladder. And just so we can get it perfect, we'll cut the radiuses off the shorter ladder at the end, and I'll show you why. Now we should have a little dot from where we traced this arc. That'll be our starting point, and that's when we're going to start putting our dots so that we can drill it out and put the ladder rungs in. So as I said, we've got our mark here and here. That should be 45mm from the end, and then from there we mark out 125mm. If we get to the bottom, there should be about 100mm left over. Now that's the important measurement here so that we can get the next ladder. I'll show you how that comes into play in a sec. So just to confirm, we've got 100mm at the bottom left over from here to that last rung. Just to make things easier, we can mark this as the top and mark this as the bottom. Now we do the same process here. Put these to the side. Mark your tops. So the top is the one with the radius already cut on it. We should have our mark. 45mm in my case. Mark out 125 all the way along. So we've marked out 7 on these longer lengths. And we've also marked out 7, but these only need 6. So what we'll do, we'll count out our 6 rungs. So that's our 6th rung here. That'll be the last one. So, to make sure these match with the longer ones, this 100mm measurement at the bottom, or whatever it might be in your case, we'll measure out 100 from our last rung, which is here. Bring back our trusty template. Now we want that to be the very tip of the arc. So we can start by putting our pencil on that mark. Now that square line there just helps us visualize what we've done, because you don't want to accidentally make this ladder too long, otherwise you'll have to recut it again. So now that we've got the length of this exact, we'll cut those off and then we'll start assembling. So this is why I mentioned earlier about cutting these shorter and putting any dodgy bits of the timber in places where they should get cut off. Good thing we spotted that early. If you can, it's best to just cut out any imperfections. Alright, now it's time to cut our dowel. You want these anywhere between about 700 to 900mm. These come in lengths of 1.8 at my hardware store, so I'm just going to cut them in half to make them 900mm. We're going to need 13 of these. Now there's no reason why you can't use a handsaw or a jigsaw to do this. Just use what you have, basically. I've got this, so why not use it? Now when you buy these, they will say they are 1.8 meters long, but usually they differ by about 5 or 10 mil. So cutting them in half might give us some different lengths by a few millimeters, which we don't want. So what I've done is just set this up at 900mm exactly, so I can just do 2 quick cuts and then I know they're going to be the exact same length. Okay, the hardest bit of this whole thing is the 2 little triangles that hold one ladder to the other to create the A-frame. Now basically you want to draw a equilateral triangle. So just start off with a right angle line about pretty close to the edge, but 200mm away. Now if you can use one of these, there's no real difference, I just prefer the bigger one. So what we want is, if we want 300mm this way, half of that is 150. So we'll measure out our 150 from here and 300. So this will be the bottom edge. Now I've done a bit of maths, and basically you want to come up 260. And doing that will give us 300mm along here. So just connect the two. That'll give us a 60-degree angle, which is the ideal angle you want to build these at. So each of those angles will be the same. Now the next thing to do here is we add the width of our ladders to either side. So 45mm this way, 45mm that way. That'll give us 90 overall. Measuring off these two lines we just drew. So these outside lines here are going to be the general shape of the triangle, but we want to cut this point off. So now the center here, which we drew earlier to make the radius, that point will correspond with this point. Line it up with these lines that we drew, and just slide it up until it hits this other line. Now we just want to trace that curve there. Now you can see here, it doesn't matter which way you come from, it's going to be the same arc. And we'll go into more detail once we've cut this out. Now that we've cut this out, we can make another one. We'll just trace it. Now there is a way you might catch yourself out on that bottom hole. There is a mark from when we did that curve, but you definitely don't want to be drilling a hole for a ladder run here. That's why it's important to level the top and the bottom, and then you can even go over your markings and make them much bolder, maybe use a permanent marker, and that way you can't make any mistakes. Now this is a 2-in-1 drill bit. It'll drill the pilot hole, and it'll also do a countersink so the screw sits flush. I highly recommend getting one of these. Now you want to do the topmost and the bottommost rail. That way it reduces the chance of any of the other rails popping out while you're trying to put it together. Check that it's square as you go, and once everything's screwed into position, wipe off any excess glue. If you've used PVA, you can just use water and a rag. If you don't wipe away the glue now when it's wet, it will stop any oil or paint from soaking in later. More so oil than paint, but it can't hurt just to do that extra little bit. Now you just want to repeat this process until you've built the other ladder, or in my case, the other three. Now you just want to round the corners off on these. That's what it used to be. That's much better. So you want to screw these on to the bigger ladders. Try to cover up any imperfections in the timber as you go. And then we need to drill some holes to clear the bolts that'll bolt the shorter ladder to the triangle. Okay, so I've just drilled some holes here. You don't want to drill or screw through this hole because that coincides with the screw that holds the dowling on the top ladder. So you just offset those 50mm from the top screw, 50mm from the bottom, and then halfway in between. These holes here are just the mirror image of these, except they're going to be bigger. This hole here is just a bit bigger. That's so they can accept these T-nuts. Those get hammered in, and that'll accept a bolt when we bolt the ladders together. So just for now, I'm going to do a dry run. I'm not going to use any glue. I'm going to screw this to the bigger ladder, show you how that goes. I'll show you how to locate that hole on the other ladder. And then once it's all bolted together, we can drill this final hole. Now this section here is where the smaller ladder bolts to. And if we remember that the screws are 125 mil apart, that'll be the top screw on the smaller ladder. So that mark there will be this top screw. And if we want to transfer this hole onto the smaller ladder, we just measure from this screw hole to there, which is 30 mil. And we measure down 30 mil from that screw. You need to buy bolts to match these T-nuts. Now you want to match a drill bit to the size of this bolt. Alright, that's pretty snug. Now we can push this bolt through. And it should thread into this T-nut. So we just want to nip up that bolt for now. You can see here they're not perfectly flush. It is going to stay that way. It's just the way it's all worked out. I'm not too concerned by that. We can just match that detail on the other ladder. So we just want a bit of a shadow line on the larger ladder to match the smaller ladder. Make sure you use the right length screw as well so it doesn't poke out the other side. Alright, now that we've got a nice consistent shadow line around, it's just even on both sides, we can drill that final hole through and that'll give us the location of the T-nut. Just make sure the ladder is parallel with this top triangle piece. Alright, now we can pull this apart again and we can put the final T-nut in, except it'll go into the side of the ladder, and that's what will create our hinging effect. Now for this hole, you don't want to drill all the way through. We only need to use a larger drill bit to drill the thickness of that far in. Now we just want to enlarge this hole so that we can fit a bolt through it. So that's one side finished. We'll flip it over and do the other side. Now that the A-frames are assembled, we'll focus on building the ramps. We just need a piece of ply, 1200 by 600 mil. The sheet's already 1200 mil. So I'm just going to measure out 600. There are a few ways you could cut this. I'm going to be using a circular saw and a straight edge. You could use a jigsaw and a straight edge. You could use a handsaw, although I wouldn't recommend it. If you are trying to do this on a budget, jigsaw is probably the best way to go. And just a straight piece of timber, straight piece of metal, whatever you have, a level, something like that. and I'll show you how you can get a perfect cut. So what we can do is clamp a straight edge to the timber. Now the key thing to remember is the straight edge will be running along this edge of the jigsaw or your circular saw. So there's obviously a measurement from here to the blade. So we need to allow for that so the jigsaw can run along the fence and the blade is going to be cutting on our line. From the blade to the fence is 30 mil. So we need to allow for that when we clamp down our straight edge. I'll show you that now. So the line we currently have marked is the line we want to be cutting along. And if we take our 30mm measurement, you can do this at both ends. And that's the line we'll be clamping the straight edge to. Make sure when you're clamping this down, the clamps are out of the way of the tool that you'll be using to cut. You can imagine if you had the clamp here, it would just be in the way. So you can see here, this is what we've been trying to set up. The edge of the jigsaw will run along the straight edge, and we can see the blade is going to cut perfectly down the line we marked earlier. I'm going to be using my circular saw. This is the right tool for the job if you don't have a table saw. A jigsaw will work, but the blade might have a tendency to creep. So you've got to keep an eye on the blade, and you can't rely on the fence as much as you can when you're using a circular saw. For our diagonal holes, we'll just cut these to 400mm. I chose that measurement because these are 1200 long. It gives me 3 equal pieces. As you can see here, this is the general layout we're going for. We will round over these edges. We'll lay it all out. We'll pre-drill our holes. And once we've done that, we can sand everything, sand off all the rough edges, and then glue it and screw it together. We'll just cut all of our rungs like this. Now that we've got one cut, we can just use this as a template and just trace around it. Now what we want to try and achieve here is even gaps in between all these holes. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gaps, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 areas for these to fit. So if we measure out 9 even gaps, we should be able to use those lines to tell us how to orient all of these holes. Okay, so that measurement in between the top and bottom was pretty close to 1100. I've divided that by 9, so that's given us 122. So we can measure out 122. We'll mark it along the sides, draw our lines across, and I'll show you how to lay these out exactly. Now if you want to go random with this, you can. You don't have to be this accurate, but if you want consistent results, if you want to use these measurements, you can. If you're making more than one, or you're mass producing these, it'd be a good idea to measure it out so that they're all the same. Now that we've got all these sections, we've got 5 sections that are going to be gaps, and then 4 sections that will tell us how to line up these holes. So we've got our top rung in position. Now this section here will be a gap, and then bring this piece so that it's touching both lines in the corner, and then we can just swing it around until this end touches the line here, and we can just repeat this zigzagging process the whole way down. Now these are where we want them, we just pre-drill them. That'll locate our screw holes. I'm just going to mark out a centre line on all these so that the screws look nice. And as we go, we can label these on the back side. We don't have to sand these marks off because they'll just get covered up when this gets put on. Now we can give this a good sand. Don't sand off your numbers. And then we can just rely on the screw holes lining back up again. If you want to make things interesting, feel free to get creative. I've had timber like this laying around at home, which I'll use. If you don't have anything laying around at home, you can obviously buy the timber that I've suggested, or you go out and buy something else that piques your interest. You might be able to find some rock climbing holds, or maybe some scraps, or any kind of timber really, whatever you think is suitable. If you want as well, you can always cut up more of that pallet that we salvaged. Okay, I'm going to use olive oil to oil all of this timber. You can use paint as long as it's child friendly. Olive oil is cheap, it's accessible, and you know for sure that it's non-toxic, so this is what I'll use. It'll help bring out some colour in the timber and give it a longer lifespan. Don't forget your gloves. See, I've put timbers across the top and bottom. It does make it less of a slide, but it does give you the option to flip the climbing holes. You can see the difference here, how one way they all angle towards the middle, and if you flip it upside down, they all angle towards the outside. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but if the little ones start getting too good, you can flip it around and keep them guessing.